hold on to your Bitcoin, do whatever you can to protect your Bitcoin so that you can pass it on to like future generations. I think with like the loan stuff, which we just talked about, it becomes so much more viable to do that, right? Where it's just like, yeah, keep it in this hard asset, grow that, pass it on. You can take loans out on it, pay them off, and you're good to go.
Welcome back to Bitcoin.com's Token Narratives, where we discuss the biggest stories shaping the Bitcoin and crypto verse. I'm Graham Stone, repping the marketing function over here at Bitcoin.com. And this week we are joined once again by Chief Scientist Andrei Terentiev. Welcome back, sir.
Thank you.
And
always good to be
yes, back. Good to have you. And we also have Bitcoin.com news and research gigabrain, David Sencil. He's back, having survived for over a week as a single father. Almost 2 weeks? Fully 2 weeks as a single father.
2 weeks, yeah.
2 weeks as a single father, while his wife was fulfilling her patriotic duty as a Japanese citizen by bringing in an additional human to this world.
Waifu.
So, congratulations, David.
Thank you. I'm glad it's over. Man, that single life is single dad, single parent thing. That is difficult.
It's rough.
Kudos to all of you out there who can do that. Woo!
So, any major incidents or like is it just a general malnourishment that your kids have seen over the last 2 weeks?
I think the biggest thing was my wife is a lot nicer than I am, and then when I had to take over every single aspect of the parenting duties, it was a shock to me how poorly behaved my kids were, and it was a shock to them how mean their father was. And so there was an adjustment period for both parties until we kind of found maybe what I would consider a happy medium, but certainly my kids would not, I think. Yeah.
Well,
a lot of time out.
I can relate to some I did the single father thing for about a month several years ago with at the time he was three or four, and I just it's kind of a hazy memory for me, but I remember several times just putting my head over a pillow while I'm trying to do a nap time, right? And and he didn't want it. He didn't want the nap. Okay. So he's trying to escape from the room. So what I did was I had my head over the pillow trying to sleep. Well, at the same time, my leg was lodged against the door, ensuring that he didn't escape the room. And eventually he just basically cried himself to sleep. And then I could get a little nap.
Yeah, that's a good encapsulation of kind of what you have to do at certain points. Yeah, it's just parental desperation.
Yes.
Absolutely.
All right. Let's kick it off here. What's your gut check, gentlemen, on the Bitcoin and crypto markets? I'll say mine real quick here first, which is that I'm not buying right here, but I've got a close eye on the markets, right? And for me, if we go back into the mid 70s range, yeah, I'll consider buying again. That's my gut check.
And this is Bitcoin, basically only.
Yeah, Bitcoin. I don't expect. I'm not looking at altcoins. Although people have been talking about Hype recently, and it's on my list of things to do. Just look into that. But I'm suspicious because I hear it being shilled by many a podcaster out there. So I've been burned before on that, namely with Tau. That was the darling for a while.
The difference being, though,
yeah, go ahead.
Well, just the difference being, though, that Hype has real revenue. I mean,
that's the narrative. That's the narrative.
Well, that's undeniable.
Yes.
It's on chain. You can see it. Like it's actually.
But is it worth $30 billion fully diluted valuation? I mean, that's the question. So anyway, something to look into. I don't expect any big moves in Bitcoin, which probably means we're going to see a big move in Bitcoin. What do you guys think?
Andrei, you can go.
Yeah,
I'll go last.
I think we bottomed. I've Cohen bottomed at 74 or whatever it was. Actually called the bottom like 2 weeks ago when it was on the first time down. And then when it went back up to like 88, I had to tell somebody like, I told you. And then the tariffs hit and it immediately dropped. I'm like, but I feel like Bitcoin survived the tariffs. We talked about this 2 weeks ago, where I think it performed admirably well compared to, you could say, the wider markets. And I think we've got a up-only period for at least a little while these tariff deals get resolved and solved. And I think all of the bad news is now priced in regards to trade war. And any, let's say, like negative effects are only going to be like felt in like a year or two, which is like bullish in my opinion. So I think we bottom. We're going to kind of slow and steady climb from here. Jay Powell might get fired in, for sure, the next 18 months. Interest rates go down. So I think we're set up for a really good place. And yeah, alts are still cooked.
Do you assign any probability to the chance that we see a COVID era style massive drop before one more last big drop before we, or do you actually, so you actually think that's not likely? We have seen the bottom.
I think we had the drop. The drop was this 30 to 35% drop, like barring some crazy new event, like, I don't know, war with China for Taiwan or something. Like that's the kind of event that would have to trigger another like big drop, which is kind of hard to like predict. But I think that 35% drop that was the big drop of this cycle.
All right, David, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know. I guess I would say that all of this depends on macro factors to me still, right? Like I have to say 2-3 weeks ago, whenever it was, I said that if traditional markets went down, then Bitcoin would go down too, and that did happen. So I was pretty happy about that. And I think if you look at like the S&P right now, you've had from peak to trough right now, you've had about a 21% drop, and then kind of a pretty fast recovery. I wouldn't be surprised if that S&P went down for the next couple of weeks, while and maybe retested its lows. And if that happens, you could maybe see Bitcoin drift down too with it, or just range. But I wouldn't be surprised if you got some, what's it called? If you got Bitcoin following the traditional markets while this tariff stuff is still kind of being played out. I think the stuff the what's it called? The retaliation with China is still kind of ramping up, and But if that stuff gets cleared in the next month or two, like the second I see any kind of decent deal, America China thing work out, if it happens at all, who knows if it's going to happen? To me, that would be a kind of an instant sign of, okay, the bottom's in, time to buy anything. I don't know if that's going to happen though. I mean, it's just so it seems so unstable, right? Like with the Trump admin. I have to say, last week I really like reached peak exhaustion in terms of the tariffs coming on and off and all this kind of stuff. I just stopped paying attention to it almost fully. I don't know about you guys, but it really reminded me of Trump's first term, where eventually you just got, no matter how you felt about the guy, it was just too much all the time. And I was just like, well, take a break.
Yeah, definitely feeling some exhaustion.
I mean, that's like why I think for all of these things, you can't have those super hard reactions right away, which is like what we talked about 2 weeks ago, where it's like, okay, everyone's calling this is the end of America. This is like the end
Oh
of
man, yeah, I know.
It's like, what? It's like, and then you have like 2 weeks of like flip flopping, and then like really nothing has happened as far as I can tell. But you got to avoid those kind of.
I called it hyperventilating in my newsletter 2 weeks ago. I was like, everybody, even a lot of the people that I respect and follow on X, it was just hyperventilation. The end of American exceptionalism. I saw that headline, I don't know, half a dozen times. Like 2 days after the tariffs are announced. Like, really? Okay. So, but again, though, like you look at this past week, I haven't followed it closely because I've been at a conference, and at least the posturing so far with China, between China and America, they've been going back and forth. You could kind of maybe see this go on for a while, I think. And I think we're going to get into this soon. It looks like it's on the docket from Graham, so I don't want to jump ahead. But I personally think, and I've said this for a long, long time, China is in worse shape than the US, and China will be hurt by this a lot more than the US, as in like a trade war kind of thing. And so I hope that Trump or the admin can do a good deal and we can move behind this. And again, just to reiterate, that's what I would be looking for like a solid bottom.
All right. Well, I think before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's talk about the Powell speech, which happened on Wednesday, speaking at the Economic Club of Chicago, which, drinks are great there. Recommend it.
The old fashions, right?
The old fashions, yeah. So his speech rattled the markets, supposedly triggering a 2% drop in BTC and equities in general. However, Bitcoin later rebounded, stabilizing in the high 84,000s and coming out with a pretty decent weekly gain, actually, around 7% on the week. So analysts are suggesting that Bitcoin is going to continue tracking equities in the near term, but everyone's looking at that eventual decouple if global monetary dynamics shift significantly. We also had a little truth. Truth was dropped from Trump. The ECB is expected to cut interest rates for the 7th time, and yet too late, Jerome Powell of the Fed, who is always too late and wrong, yesterday issued a report, which was another and typical complete mess. Oil prices are down, groceries, even eggs are down, and the USA is getting rich on tariffs. Too late should have lowered interest rates like the ECB did long ago, but he should certainly lower them now. Powell's termination cannot come fast enough. Then so that's
classic Trump.
Classic Trump. A little inflammatory to say the least. We got a little prediction markets here, which shout out to Chief Scientist Andrei, who has recently set up this feature on markets.bitcoin.com. We got all the hot prediction markets now, and here we have Chairman Powell peering over his glasses, and the markets are predicting the chance of a rate cut has fallen precipitously. I think 90% no in the next meeting, which I think is 3 weeks from now.
Yeah, I think you can see basically the blue drop was the 25 BIP cut. So that I think right after the speech, people said no more cut. So I think it seems pretty determined that there will be no changes in the short term while Powell is still chair.
Yeah. Any chance? Yeah, go ahead, David.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, any chance that they actually fire him, or is this
Can't be fired?
Well, anything's possible, isn't it? Under Trump,
I don't think he can be fired. His term, his what's it called? His whatever it is, his not term, but the his term will end basically. Yeah, and then they could have somebody else, or he could voluntarily leave. I don't know if the executive has the power or the authority. I don't think it does to force him out.
One thing I want to add here is a tweet from one of my favorite commentators I've mentioned several times on the pod, which is Alex Kruger, and he says he's commented on the Powell thing, and he says he's predicting Powell will get replaced May 2026. Everyone knows that, but he's saying QE starts in the second half of the year. So that's his prediction. That's quite a long time from now to see QE. Over a year.
He thinks it's going to start next May. Is that it? Or second half of the year?
Second half of 2026, right? Because Powell gets replaced in May 2026. Yeah. Then QE starts in the second half of the year.
I mean, here's the interesting dynamics at work though is, the U.S. doesn't necessarily have to cut right now. I mean, it's in a kind of a decent position. Now, again, is the economy particularly strong? No. But if you compare it to other economies like Europe and China, Japan, they all have already given indications that they're going to start money printing, right? And traditionally what happens when other countries print money is a decent chunk of that goes into the US anyway, right? That money finds its way into the US markets anyway. This is kind of part of Brett Johnson's milkshake theory, thus the milkshake, as in the capital around the world, money printed around the world, the liquidity around the world will be siphoned into the US. And so you get into this interesting dynamic where the U.S. can take pain, and it can probably take pain longer than any other economy. And if these other economies they've stated it that they're going to start printing money, like Germany, for example, and China, for example, then the U.S. could ostensibly get quite a benefit from that, while not taking on some of the money debasing risks, like the inflation risks and stuff. So I don't know. I imagine Powell might be thinking something like that. Obviously, Trump and Bessent, they would like rates to be down now because it does put a little pressure on the U.S. economy. But geopolitically, there are other considerations.
I'm hearing. Yeah, go ahead, Andrei. You go first.
I was just going to say, I'm also one thing about Powell's statements. For me, it's still like a TBD if there's going to be inflation because of all of this. I think like the hyperventilators are screeching like this is going to lead to massive inflation. But like currently we don't see this, right? Where, I think like the Trueflation index, we have like the lowest inflation since like, I don't know, a couple 4 years or whatever. Um, Now people are setting, that's going to be a long-term effect, but I think Pump actually had a decent like counterpoint to this is like the last time that there were tariffs, there were not actually any significant increase in the prices. And the one that like I thought was the best one was the washing machines. So washing machines, yeah, I have no idea why washing machines were specifically tariffed, but apparently that was like one of the key items. And basically, you had this like big spike from the tariff, and then it basically went back down to below cost pretty shortly after. So with this kind of thing, it's like that's kind of the Trump theory. Like this will actually not lead to inflation, and I'm curious how that plays out. And then if it does play out like that, then it just makes it even harder for Powell to be like, "Oh, we're not lowering rates." Like, but we'll see.
Yeah. Just following up on that, I noticed that inflation in Canada has dropped, and that's being attributed to, in some ways, to the Trump policies. So this article from Bitcoin.com news is saying, okay, part of it is that just the lower prices for fuel, but the other part is actually, it's kind of funny. Discounted travel tours have caused a drop in inflation in Canada. So basically, Canadians are so up in arms with the actions in the US that they're refusing to visit, which has dropped the inflation numbers in Canada to some extent. Anyway,
kind of riddance.
Side funny note. Yeah.
I know I've mentioned this before. I think I mentioned him last time I was on 2 weeks ago, but Michael Cow, I think he's been one of the best financial pundits who hasn't been hyperventilating about this. So again, I highly recommend following his account, and he puts out like these long kind of daily threads, stream of consciousness threads. And I've been really enjoying them because he hasn't been following this kind of sensationalist crowd about the tariffs and stuff like that. But one point that he's made for years, at least two, but longer, is that Powell, in his estimation, Powell is always very, very far behind the curve, as they say. He's always fighting the last war. And so he was burned by inflation. And ever since he's been burned by inflation, that's kind of become his boogeyman. And so, yeah, he really, really, really doesn't want to repeat that mistake. And so that's probably influencing some of his kind of resistance to lowering rates as well. Even though, as Andrei points out, lots of signs indicate that inflation isn't really a problem right now, and won't be.
I think it might make sense to switch gears here and talk a little bit about the yuan. So the US dollar yuan ratio is at its lowest rate in about 20 years, it seems. This means that the yuan has been devaluing relative to the US dollar, and we've seen a spike here in the last month. Right. So when the yuan goes down in value, people look to get their money out of China. And obviously, Bitcoin is one method to do that. So I wonder if you guys have any thoughts on this. Could that be a bullish catalyst?
But just lingering on that thing, the primary way the Chinese have gotten their money, their value, their net worth out of the yuan has been gold. And this has been true for a long time. And again, some of the people that I follow point to the kind of precipitous rise in gold for the past several years as being driven not by the Chinese government, because you see lots of people saying, oh, the Chinese government is buying all this gold, and you can see this inflow of gold into China. That's one explanation of it. The other one that I tend to think is true is, as you've said, Graham, the yuan has been under stress since COVID, basically, right? The yuan has been absolutely kind of attacked. Some think, like Michael Howell, think that this has been on purpose by like the US and Japan, right? Putting pressure on China, putting pressure on the Chinese yuan purposefully. Anyway, so the yuan has been pressured for at least 4 years since COVID, and the wealthy people in China are trying to get the hell out of it, but they can't, right? Because they have capital controls. However, they can buy gold. And so they've been buying the hell out of gold. And it hasn't, the government it is too, to a certain extent, but a large part of it, maybe the majority of it, has been Chinese citizens who are trying to capital flight. So Bitcoin, yes, a little bit, but I think mostly gold.
I mean, this is the OG Bitcoin thesis that your fiat currency is trash, and it's going to get consistently devalued by the government because the government has every incentive to print more for whatever they want to spend it on, right? Like, so I think that's just playing out in real time for basically every currency across the globe. And I think, like, in today's society, like, anybody that's accumulated assets kind of knows, right, that fiat currencies are not where you store your assets. That would be like very stupid. And then we see, okay, where does that go into? Yeah, I think gold, Bitcoin are like the obvious choices on a global market perspective, especially if you're nervous on some sort of, or you're trying to take away, what do you call it, like sovereignty risk, where some nation defaults or some nation's economy goes to crap or whatever. Gold and Bitcoin are like the two options that can protect you from like sovereignty risk, because equities don't do that, bonds don't do that. You know, these are stateless currencies or assets that you can keep your wealth in. Now, I think what's the interesting thing is, you know, the U.S. and it's been very clear, Trump, that he's very annoyed that China and Japan are always devaluing their currencies more, I guess, than the U.S. does. And we'll see if that trend starts to flip or if anybody does anything about that. I think the yen in particular bounced back quite a bit from its like peak, or I don't know if it's peak or trough, 160 per dollar. I think it's at 140 now. And Japan is obviously much more of an ally to the US compared to China, which might signal, okay, maybe they're starting to reverse that trend. BOJ and as a liberal, but we'll see with zero interest rates.
I just I don't understand how you could. I guess you just have to force a country like Japan to not devalue its currency at a greater rate than the US dollar, if that's what you want. Because like, how do you convince them? Because it's in every country's interest, like the Euro region, the Japanese yen, and you want your currency to be worth less.
Yes.
Because that boosts your domestic manufacturing industries. So it's just like the only like what happened. What was it? The Bretton Woods, right? Like they forced Japan to
devalue,
to not devalue.
Sorry, yeah. No,
right. They forced Japan to keep its currency strong relative to the dollar, didn't they?
No, I thought the yen was. They wanted the yen to get stronger. I thought maybe I'm crazy there. Anyway, yeah, maybe you're right. I'm just insane. Yeah, it probably is.
I feel like that's what they wanted. They wanted the US dollar to not be too strong.
Yeah, the U.S. wanted the dollar to not be too strong.
Exactly. So
Japan devalued. The yen.
No,
I'm gonna ask ChatGPT.
Okay, while you do that, there's an interesting theory that was put forward by Joe McCann, who's the founder and CEO of Asymmetric. It's a company in the crypto space, an investment business. And so he's saying that, okay, so currently the yuan is at $7 or 7.3 yuan per US dollar. And he has a theory that if it goes back down to the like 720 rate, basically what that means is China and US are working out a deal of some kind. On the other hand, if it continues to stay above the 720 level and devalue further, it means no deal is coming, which in turn means that China is going to have to do a monster stimulus, which, as we know, is good for asset prices.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Real quick, I did look it up in the meantime. So we got the Plaza Accord, not Bretton Woods.
Plaza Accord, yes. Thank you.
And basically, the yen appreciated, so they wanted to stop the devaluation of the yen. The U.S. wanted to stop the devaluation of the yen, so the yen ended up appreciating from 240 to 120.
Exactly.
And the reason for that was, I think, specifically related to auto manufacturing. So I think at that time they were selling a lot of cheap cars to the U.S., which cars is always the sticking point apparently.
And at that time, Japan, if you watch Hollywood movies at the time, Japanese were like the villains.
Yeah, that was my bad. Yeah, it's the same situation that you have in China right now. How do you force them
to do that again, though? Right? That's I don't understand how you can do that. Like you just, I guess.
I mean, this is kind of the art of the deal, right? You have to figure out some trade deal that makes sense. Where it's like, okay, we have to have some either balance or something. You can't just keep devaluing your currency to basically push the trade surplus in your favor. Right, it's got to be basically negotiated, right? Where it's like your internal monetary policy has to be friendly to us in some way. I don't know the nuts and bolts of that, but yeah, it's purely negotiating or forcing them.
And it often involves like the country's, what's it called, ratio of like how much sovereign bonds that they're buying or selling from the U.S. to kind of, right, because the one of the primary reasons that probably the yen has strengthened recently is the what's it called, some of the major banks have been unwinding their positions in the U.S., so they've been selling their dollars for yen and repatriating that money, which causes the yen to strengthen. So the government can the Japanese government can like put pressure on local banks to buy more sovereign bonds or to sell more of their holdings to, influence the strength or the weakness of the yen one way or the other, depending on a deal that gets reached between the U.S. and Japan.
Right, and it's not even just the governments too, right? Like basically private entities take advantage of this whole thing as well, where like the soft banks of the world will borrow at zero interest rates a bunch of yen. You use that to buy dollars and buy, whatever companies in the U.S. And now these outside companies or sovereign states own, this like these U.S. assets, and they just keep money printing to do that. And this is kind of, I feel like, the crux of the whole trade war is that the Trump regime is saying we can't just not have any assets anymore. We can't just, give all the assets, all of the factories, all of the ownership to somebody else and just be this importer who actually has nothing. So the fight continues, but I think it's good for Bitcoin regardless.
All right. What happens to altcoins? Let's talk about that because you put this topic on the docket, David.
Well, yeah, that Coinbase research report, suggesting that 41% drop in the
Yeah, just let me bring it up here.
yeah.
Here we go.
So we've seen a 41% drop in the crypto market cap, excluding Bitcoin. Yeah, and from December to mid-April, right? So what, 5 months, 4 months, and the report suggests that we might be entering a new crypto winter. I imagine this is just a kind of a sensationalist thing to grab headlines, but it does beg the question of what happens to the altcoin market. And I just wanted to ask you guys this through kind of several scenarios, like based on Bitcoin's movement, what you guys think happens. So let's say Bitcoin goes down from here, right? Maybe not much, but let's just say it trends down from here. What happens to the altcoin market?
They go
that's
down
the first
more.
scenario. They go down more.
Yeah. So the
Do
one,
they?
the one,
Like how much more? I wonder. They've
so I
gone
think
down
there's two.
so much.
I think there's like two things that. So I think like general altcoins, Solana, ETH, they go down a lot, right? If BTC goes down, all the alts are going to giga nuke. There might be like one or two that like pump or whatever. But I think the interesting trend though is still we still see a lot of TVL coming on chain via stablecoins. So what I see in that scenario is like, do we just basically become like a Bitcoin market and a primarily stable coin market, and then like this very niche altcoin thing? It's almost like, Bitcoin now it caps like, I don't know, 60% or whatever. Or stable coins will be like 40%, and then there'll be everything else. And I feel like that actually plays out in both the Bitcoin goes down and Bitcoin goes up scenario, because I just see zero demand for altcoins at this point. Like everyone's just completely burned out by altcoins. So for new ones,
I don't think I still don't think we've seen like a substantial influx of retail yet, though. I mean, it just doesn't seem like previous cycles, and I think a lot of the numbers bear that out.
yeah, but I think the difference is this: now you have like some history. It's like kind of looking altcoins are like, it's like that one shitcoin chart where it's like down 90%. And you look at the chart over the past 5 years and be like, you know what? I think it's going to make a turnaround here. This is where it turns around. Nobody buys that chart, right? When you have the 90% down 5-year chart, the turnaround is very unlikely. In previous cycles, it's like, well, it's only been a year, right? There's new things coming up. Now there's like this evidence where even if retail comes in and you have this like, you look at these charts like, I'm just going to buy Bitcoin. That's how I view it, anyways.
So Andrei, you think? Hold on. Let's go through these different scenarios. So we all agree that if Bitcoin goes down, alts go down. If Bitcoin ranges, alts go. What do you think? Alts go down?
I think they go down versus BTC. I don't know if they go down in terms of fiat terms. I think they go down in terms of BTC terms.
And then Graham, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And then Bitcoin
and then the final
rips.
Scenario, yeah.
So it goes down in all three scenarios.
If Bitcoin rips, some altcoins will outperform Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think they will go up they'll definitely go up in fiat terms. But I don't see any trend reversal in the BTC terms.
Basically, you guys think that Bitcoin dominance, no matter what happens for the next little while, I guess, increases.
Yeah, because I don't see what the catalyst is. The only hope or the only catalyst I see on the horizon is stablecoin market and credit markets, right? Like these are like real markets that can generate like substantial amount of volume. The issue is I don't see how any like huge blow up in those markets translate to the price of Solana or Ethereum.
I think the catalyst usually for Bitcoin dominance going down is a raging bull market. Isn't that it? Like people start to go further out on the risk curve.
Yeah, I feel like it has to be like extreme, right? Where it's like, but that's the question: do we have an extreme bull market kind of left in us? Right? We've kind of talked about this for like we're maybe at the 50% mark. Like, how much does Bitcoin have to go up in order for people to be like, all right, I'm ready to go into the altcoin market? What would be the 250? Maybe like that would be my number of like people would just be like, all right, time to go in on Solana and Tron and BNB.
Bearish altcoins.
And hey, I hold a lot of I love altcoins. I hold a lot of altcoins, but they haven't done well, and I don't see the catalyst flipping.
Yeah, I think if we get a scenario where, like, for example, now till next to May, next year, mid next year, we just kind of consolidate, I guess, deal with this trade war stuff. The U.S. doesn't lower interest rates, but if especially if the U.S. can wait that long and you start money printing, I think then you would enter some kind of crazy bull market psycho mode at that point.
Yeah,
where just everything pumps.
Everything. GameStop style.
The other hope I have for Ethereum to turn around is tariffs. Tariffs for all the L2 chains. So they have to increase the blob fees and start generating like more revenue for that. That's the only way I see it as like viable economic accrual.
I haven't been around that much, but this week because of a conference. But I cannot believe that somehow what I've seen on the timeline this past week, just connected to that, Andrei, is the Ethereum sentiment, the community feeling I've seen this week has been lower than ever. Like it's so beyond funny now that it just gets worse and worse, and you're like, oh, it can't get much worse. But holy crap, the sentiment in the Ethereum community seems somehow to have found a lower low.
Yeah, and the crazy thing that so I use Base a lot. I use Ethereum a lot. I've been using it more than ever, specifically because of the credit markets and stablecoin markets. So I've been using Ethereum and Base and L2s more than probably in the past like 2 years combined. But it's just like, despite this, it is way more usable. It's much better than it was 5-6 years ago. Like way, 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 way better. And despite all that, like it's just horrible sentiment, horrible price action. So
what, Andrei, if you don't mind my asking, what exactly are you doing there?
Primarily just doing like loans. So this is where I think actually, by the way, is a really good use case for BTC. Is using your BTC as collateral to get altcoins, ETH, and stable coins, and then farming them. Right? Like, I think that's like the good part that has come up in the past couple of years is now there's real yield sources. So the one thing that if ETH did well is they have the proof of stake dividend. So there's like real money coming from that. Now you have stable coins providing all of the treasury yields or whatever. You have bond markets with Pendle. So they're offering fixed yields. And you have the classic like inflation, people giving away tokens for providing liquidity and all these kind of things. So there's actually a lot of new opportunities to, use your Bitcoin as collateral and like farm stuff. The lending markets are way better, way more chains, all of this.
You deposit some WBTC or other wrapped Bitcoin somewhere, that you get some stable coins, and you deploy those in strategies that give you some yield.
Correct. Yes. And there's a lot more dynamic elements these days, just because there are so many new chains, new stable coins. The fact that you have like fixed yields makes people actually start, betting on the yields. Is the Aave yield going to go up or is it going to go down? Well, the way to do that is you buy Pendle yield tokens and try to lever up on that. Or if you think, okay, Aave's yields are going to go down, you lock in your yield at 10% and sit on it. So I think the yield market has just become way more dynamic. And that's like where I see a potential actual like growth in the coming years for ETH in general, and the L2 ecosystem in general.
Yeah, it's kind of exciting, and I think we've talked about this a lot. Like, if you were to put the entire TradFi system on crypto rails, it would enable all of these like exotic financial instruments that you can't really do right now in TradFi, or it's hard for most people to do. It democratizes them, and you can have a lot more experiment. Like I mean, it could be a Cambrian explosion of financial wizardry.
Yeah, I'd say it's going on. It's just small scale.
Yeah, what Andrei is talking about reminds me of like sovereign bond markets, right? Like all the crazy stuff that goes on there. Yeah, so
I think this is like this is really interesting for me because like I think there's been a lot of talk about like Bitcoin in the DeFi space, and people are like, oh, I want to earn like 1% to 2% on my Bitcoin or like whatever, and that's been like the goal. But I think that's actually probably the real goal is to unlock like Bitcoin based debt, right? Like where it's like cheap enough to just like, hey, I'm going to keep my hard assets in Bitcoin and I'm going to keep accumulating those, and I'm just going to borrow the fiat, right? I'm the same way I use my credit card. I'm just going to borrow that and pay it off at the end of the month. I have no need for like holding fiat. So the further down that curve that we get, the more, I would say the easier it is to become fully Bitcoin only. So this like, right, Bitcoin, I get the stable coins, I pay them off at the end, load up a debit card, pay them off at the end of the month. You're good to go, right? I think spending the Bitcoin directly, never spend your Bitcoin in that way. Use it to get the depreciating asset and sell the depreciating asset.
Yeah, exactly. Using your Bitcoin as collateral.
Yeah.
That's the way forward. Actually, that reminds me, do you guys mind if I share this clip here from Sam Hyde on Bitcoin? David, could you explain who Sam Hyde is? I feel like you know this guy better than me. While I set this up,
he's a comedian, a comic personality, an influencer, I guess, and he has a lot of controversial takes on cultural topics. But as far as I know, he was pretty early to Bitcoin and has been a staunch advocate of Bitcoin. And I think the clip that you're loading up is something from his recent show that he started. But this particular episode is somewhat devoted to Bitcoin and to encouraging his audience, who they're not crypto people really, right? They're a completely different audience, honestly, and to kind of learn about Bitcoin, and the potential for what it can do for his audience personally, like financially.
All right, let me play the clip.
Yeah,
not literally, but it's like almost like your blood. So what is there that's more important than your time and your energy, right? And it's like you could say that like family is more important than money, but what are you doing when you're away from your family? You're trading your time and energy for the stuff that you need to like get by in life. It's a core civilizational technology like fire, and to fuck with the parameters of money, to like mess with the the little variables and the ingredients that make it what it is, you're messing with something that's at the base of a really powerful vector. Like little changes down here make the vector swing wildly. Robert Kiyosaki, is that the guy's name? Who's the guy that wears the glasses that he stole from me? Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And he says, gold is God's money. I don't think that that's hyperbole or a fallacious thing to say or something that is like out of pocket saying. I think that using precious metals for money, in particular, the one precious metal that every civilization settled upon using as money, I don't think it's coincidence.
You said something to me that was very interesting. You said Bitcoin isn't something you're going to want to sell. It's something you're going to want to pass down to your kids.
Yeah.
Which that is basically how I look at gold, how I've looked at gold. And now I'm a little more, listen, I dove in head first, so I'm kind of getting into Bitcoin a lot more. But that was a very interesting statement.
I'm starting to ramble, and I would just urge anybody watching this to do the research on Bitcoin and figure out what it is, because it's not going anywhere, and it's going to be the unit of account for the future. If it's not going to change your life materially, it's going to change the lives of your children materially. Put aside the negativity and the anxiety that comes with thinking about money and the surface level Ponzi scheme, get rich quick stuff that is associated with cryptocurrency, and start researching Bitcoin and what it is, because there's still 100x in there.
I like his
What do you think?
garage studio, by the way.
So he's gone for 10 million.
And the he's using a crazy anamorphic lens. I don't know if you guys could tell how like wide that is.
Okay.
Like 2.61, I think, or more. And then highly distorted on the sides. Anyway, yeah, he what do you think? 100x, huh?
I mean, I think he's like right where Bitcoin taps into something like primal for people, the same way like gold does, where I don't know, it forces this like cult-like behavior that even is not present on altcoins, right? And it's totally the same way where, yeah, I agree with them, where the dogma is hold on to your Bitcoin, do whatever you can to protect your Bitcoin so that you can pass it on to like future generations. I think with like the loan stuff, which we just talked about, it becomes so much more viable to do that, right? Where it's just like, yeah, keep it in this hard asset, grow that, pass it on. You can take loans out on it, pay them off, and you're good to go.
Yeah, I don't know about 100x, but
in 100 years, 100x in 100 years.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you start looking at that time frame, you have to make a lot of assumptions. As we've talked about many times, like the security budget issue needs to be solved. But anyway, that's a whole rabbit hole. It's good to see a guy like this proselytizing the Bitcoin. It's nice to see.
Yeah. I still think that, though, I spoke with a couple people at the conference I was just at, that I personally think, let's say all Bitcoin development stopped right now, and so it ossified 100%, and it became this kind of enshrined thing right now. I think it would lose. I would bet that it would lose to something else. So I don't think the job is done, and I don't think that Bitcoin people and developers can just kind of rest on their laurels and say that this is the end state of Bitcoin. That's my personal feeling. And so it still needs a lot of work. Like, dude, with the interview I had with Aaron van Weerden, the Bitcoin magazine editor-in-chief, there was a clip that we had released out, which is basically, even he was admitting that, whatever's broken with Bitcoin, whatever's wrong with Bitcoin, it needs to be fixed. And it needs to be fixed on Bitcoin because, he thinks Bitcoin is the answer and that nothing else can be the answer. But kind of implicit in what he's saying, though, is that Bitcoin is not perfect in its current state, and whatever's broken on it or not optimal needs to be fixed. And yeah.
My whole viewpoint, the point I disagree with a lot of the maxis, or I guess like the Bitcoin DeFi crowd, is like, I don't know if it needs to be fixed on Bitcoin. Like that's like my take, where it's like you'll have all these Bitcoin derivatives, the WBTCs and the CBBTCs and the GABC BTCs, and you'll be able to use those in the form of faster transaction speed, in the form of DeFi, in the form of whatever, right? Now, I think probably on the security budget, that's the one point where I'd be like, yeah, that needs to be fixed on Bitcoin. But like for the points around like the DeFi side of things, you can call them like the fancy features. That's where I'm like, I'm not sure, right? Like, I'm not sure if those need to be fixed on Bitcoin.
Well, a lot of the conversation I had with him, it kind of got derailed in the middle of it because we went off on this tangent about the censorship resistance of Bitcoin. And it's just not censorship resistant because the Bitcoin you can kind of single out Bitcoin, and at different times, exchanges and authorities have kind of marked certain Bitcoins as
it's not fungible.
It's not fungible, right? You can totally, in different governments and stuff can totally pick out like that Bitcoin is toxic or this kind of thing. And so, yeah, let's imagine a future where Bitcoin does 100x and it is the unit of account. Well, then you're going to have every powerful country in the world really, really, really paying attention to Bitcoin. And these kinds of things that are not really a problem now, like censorship resistance, man, those will be kind of almost existential, right? Like you could start censoring sats even, right? Oh, this is used by drug, like money laundering and stuff like that. I don't know.
For that side, I think like it's kind of like the game theory aspect starts like playing into it, right? Where it's like in the early stages, it's like pure miner game theory. It's like we're gonna have enough miners that they're not gonna collude, and now we have like 10 big mining pools or like something like that.
Yeah. 10 mining pools represent 80% of all blocks created.
Yeah, and this is like, it seems like that has become less and less of a concern by like people that are, I don't know, promoting changes to Bitcoin.
It's been swept under the rug.
Well, Bitcoin, Aaron said in our interview, that's the thing that he's focused on right now the most is this mining kind of centralization issue.
Yeah.
And then they're already making protocols and stuff. But the point is, so then there's lots of developers who've already kind of spent the past 5 years tackling this issue, and some of their projects are coming to fruition right now to tackle this centralization problem with mining. And so it looks to me like from some of the interviews I did an interview with another guy at Mena. That problem is not solved right now, but it's on the way to being solved. And so the development is still very active and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say where I agree is like there are core fundamental improvements like the censorship resistance that I think do need to be improved and should be improved. And then, yeah, it'll take years for people to work on those. So kind of looking forward to how it progresses.
But I mean, I think maybe the answer for the censorship resistant kind of stuff is like, let's say you have a 100% trustless bridge to say Xano or something like that, right? And so you bring over a bunch of Xano BTC on a trustless bridge from Bitcoin, which would needs, I think, some tweaking from like some opcodes from Bitcoin right now. Anyway, once it's on Xano, somebody could make a confidential asset that takes that Bitcoin and maybe makes a stable coin from it, or I don't know, fractionalize it in some way, and then that's used as what's it called, something to exchange. That could bring some level of censorship resistance to parts of Bitcoin. I don't know if the base layer itself needs to be 100% censorship resistant. Although, I mean, again, if you play it out a long enough time horizon, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, one thing's for certain, the whole journey is gonna be fascinating, and we will be here to witness it and cover it and talk about it endlessly. So I think that's a good place to end this episode of Bitcoin.com's Token Narratives. Thanks, David and Andrei. And thanks, everyone, for listening. We'll catch you next time.